Welcome everyone, Medyhne here from Arise Humanity, and I am excited to share that I have just created a Patreon community which will be for people that are interested in getting more content. There will be paintings and music and even potentially books and free group gatherings for live readings, past life readings and things like that. So there will be some really great content coming with anyone who joins this community, and I really value anyone as well joining, because it supports everything that I'm doing online. I've been making these videos which are very time consuming, and I love doing it. It's fantastic, but it supports everything that I'm doing on this channel and everything I'm doing to contribute to the collective. I answer a lot of emails and comments and try to support people as much as I can, and anything that you can contribute in terms of this Patreon community will be a great support for me in paying my bills, basically. So that would be fantastic. Thank you. And I also have the details below if you'd like to go and have a look there. There's a fantastic manifesto that I created about unity consciousness, and we're going to be also exploring ways that we can really develop globally unity consciousness at this time, which is so important. And I'd also like to share that, as well as my normal sessions, one-on-one sessions that are available, I am also offering, due to demand, because I posted a few videos back about a galactic experience that not only me but many people have been having, and people were asking me and sending me emails and comments about how to work on their ascension. So I've created a short one-on-one session for people. It's very affordable, $60 Australian, and it's basically got information, tools and techniques to work towards ascension, including a bit of an analysis at the beginning as well. So if that interests you, love to work with you. Please contact me, details below. And I hope you love this upcoming video. I will share that this video coming up is an incredible one, put together with Cambell Purvis from Auto Didactic, where we really explore some incredibly hidden mysteries that seem to indicate that our whole history has been falsified, which many of us know. So this is a very revealing video, and we've come together after I did a show with Kelly and Cam on Auto Didactic. I wanted to get Cam back to do this video on what's happening with things like Tataria, the mud floods, the orphan trains, the incubator babies, and star forts and giants. So much information to share. So please enjoy this video. I'm very excited about it. And if you value the content, I'd love you to join my Patreon community. So thank you again. Much love to you all out there. And thank you for watching. Well, I am super excited to welcome the wonderful Cambell Purvis here. And Cambell is very well known for his channel Auto Didactic, and also his personal channel Spiral Up. And he has so many videos with the lovely Kelly on Auto Didactic in regards to the whole scope of the topic of Tataria, the mud floods, and all those types of fascinating areas of human interests that are not explored. So these are things that have been hidden from us, and I'm really thrilled to be able to talk about this today, because I don't know if that many people have actually heard about Tataria and the mud floods and things like that, and the orphans. I know many people have heard about the giants, but I don't know if they've heard about the incubator babies and all that sort of thing. So, I'd really love to, explore that a bit more. And on that topic, it's things like, we're seeing now that with mainstream media and the whole situation in, Russia and the Ukraine, I think I can say those words, where the whole narrative is completely biased in one direction, and from my intuitive perspective, completely fake and false. So, you know, it's just so interesting to look back in this human evolution and know that our whole history basically has been falsified. And I really think it's interesting that the word libraries is where lies are buried. I thought we could throw all our history books in a heap, in a junk heap, in the rubbish, and we can start from scratch. So on that note, big welcome, Cam, and good on you too for everything that you're doing to expose things that have been hidden from us, because it doesn't serve our controllers or the elite or the ones that are wanting us to stay in the dark, basically. So I'd like to start perhaps by asking you about why did this topic get you interested in the first place? So what got you rolling with this?
Yeah. I've always been a history buff ever since I can remember. I've always known there was something wrong, and for some reason I thought the answers were in history, so I've always tried to sort of go down that. And obviously it used to be the megaliths and the pyramids and, you know, all that kind of stuff, Graham Hancock's kind of study.
Yep.
And then I came across a channel called New Earth Channel about 6 or 7 years ago, and she was talking about Tataria and showing mud flooded buildings and star forts and stuff I'd never heard of. And star forts just blew my brain out pretty much, because I didn't know they existed, and started looking into that. They are everywhere.
Well,
and then the mud flood building pictures.
Yeah.
Then mud flood buildings with the windows that go into the ground, and then you start looking at giant size. You mentioned the giants. All these architecture and the buildings we have that are clearly too big for us. They're just oversized. And when you look back into the past, there used to be bigger ones, and the really big ones, they've knocked them all over to get rid of them. So there's all these interesting questions, but and the main thing it did is it brought history a lot closer. Like when you look into megaliths and all that kind of stuff, it's always pushed back, oh, this was thousands of years ago and this was, you know, blah, blah, blah. But when you get into Tataria, and Tataria, you know, it's just a name, you know, sort of old, I like to call it old world. You realize that this stuff, it's not that far away, you know, our history, or, you know, his story, right? The story they give us.
Yeah.
You know, we had a fully functioning high-tech civilization, you know, a couple of 100 years ago, probably.
And many times over, potentially as well. We've had
that's
over. I mean, David Adair, who is the rocket scientist that is, you know, very well known for his engineering and, you know, having one of the highest intelligences on the planet, apparently, he talks about there being at least 7 basically deconstructions of humanity, so that there was nothing, and then starting from scratch. No, so I think he said it was either 7 or 9 times. I can't remember, but I just listened to him the other day, and he said that there's evidence, you know, to support that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, there is. And this is one of the interesting things is we, you know, in the community, the research community, we kind of hit on that there was a reset back in the 1800s, and we literally sort of started talking about resets like months, you know, probably 6 months before, guess what, we're in the middle of a reset. So it's really interesting how the research has kind of gone along, and it's going along with what's happening in real time at the moment, which makes it interesting as well, you know, with all this information and disclosure and that, it's all tied to the families, you know, if I can say that, and all these, you know, the rulers and the elites, how they got there, you know, how we got here. It's the story that we're going through now is really what we've been looking into as a community for the last sort of 4, 5, 6 years. So that's really, really interesting. And of course, you mentioned the orphan children, and with, you know, the last reset, then we've come across all these orphans everywhere, and it's really interesting that Yeah, do you want me to? Oh, I've
I've
got
got
some
some
if you want me
too.
to share, or have you got some? Or?
I've got some too.
Okay, yeah, you go first. You show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Why not? Okay, so here's one here, which is called the baby incubators that were, I think, in Seattle in America. And so these baby incubators it says with living babies, once seen, never forgotten. So and there were a whole lot of these incubator babies, pictures where they showed them in their there's some at Coney Island too. That I think that was a park, wasn't it? A sort of a fun park thing.
Yeah, it was like a
yeah. So I'm just going to put that one on as well. The Incubator Babies of Coney Island. There's a picture there.
Yeah, there we go.
And also a photo here of the infant incubators. It's so interesting too, Cam, because I was talking to someone just in the last couple of weeks, and they said that their grandfather was an incubator baby. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, there's a clip of Jerry Seinfeld on a talkback show, and he says the same thing. He says, "Oh yeah, my dad was I think he says an orphan train child. I'm not sure if it's incubator or orphan train, but yeah, same kind of thing." It's interesting because it's like it's a sort of a piece of our history that's been wiped, because when you look into it, most people were orphans. And you look back into the literature as well of the 1800s, it's all orphans, right? Charles Dickens and all these kind of authors.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you a list of some of the ones, just to reel off the top of my head, some of the orphans. So we're looking at Cosette in Cosette from Les Miserables, Peter Pan, Rapunzel, Snow White, Mowgli, Jane Eyre, and then you've got people like, and I'll bring them up on here. The screen's all over the place here. We've got Tom Sawyer, so he's very famous in fiction, Tom Sawyer. And then you've got, of course, so you only remember all this when you get reminded, but then you've got also Heidi, very famous book. I remember reading that so many times when I was little. You've got Heidi, and then you've got, of course, you can forget Anne of Green Gables. So she's a huge one that, and so many recent, series of her as well that have just been made. Anne of Green Gables there. So she's a very famous book. There's also another one, which is, of course, the very famous Charles Dickens books, Oliver Twist. Of course, it was centered around an orphanage as well, with all the other orphans. And, these are just some of the ones in our history, but there is just so many to think of. And, so what do you think in terms of these incubator babies and these orphans and things? What do you think happened to the adults? Because we look at things like this so-called Spanish flu, and we know that from what we've been reading a lot of information about lately, that the thing that they gave them for this that goes in our arm, that was responsible for the millions and millions of deaths relating to that. It seems very clear that was another incident of where they've employed a BIO,
Yeah, I mean, the history of those is pretty interesting when you look into it. It started back in the sort of mid to late 1700s, and literally you can map where these people went around and they gave out their wares, and then people, like the health and the population just got worse and worse as they went around. And it's been going on, for centuries, to the point now where we think it's acceptable for like a baby, literally seconds or minutes old, to have some of that in them. So it's definitely part of it, because and look where we find ourselves now. But there's a lot of interesting stuff went on. We've had many resets. We've had some big ones. Everyone knows of the flood. So we've had big sort of realm-wide cataclysmic resets, but we've also had lots of, I don't know, like soft resets, right?
Yeah.
And it is all based on astrology and you know, the timeline and things that are happening, and basically those that wish to rule us, they sort of, you know, that's all the knowledge that they keep hidden, right? That they know, and so they're using these things. And so back in the 1800s, there were wars. There was the Napoleonic Wars and all these kind of things going on, and then you go up into the 1860s, and that whole time was pretty much war. You go to America, you got the Civil War, all this, that, you know, and they basically went around and destroyed all the cities. And so we have this scenario of these destroyed cities, and then you know, like 20 years later, we have pictures of the cities and they're rebuilt, and there's adults in them, but no kids. And then you get sort of pictures later on, and there's suddenly kids there, and you get these strange photos of adults holding kids back in the 1860s and 70s, and it's like they don't know what to do with them. Wow. It's you know, it's like they've got, so I mean, this is, and of course we don't, you know, this is all kind of, you know, speculation, I guess, at this point. You know, we can't prove any of this, but everyone, you know, has heard about what's, you know, been going on underground, shall we say.
Exactly. Can I just add in, you know, when you put all this together, it all starts to form a picture. So you're looking at the Masonic Creed here, written by John D. Rockefeller. Let me show you. Very interesting. So I'm wondering how much I can say of this on this particular
Can you read it?
I'll try. The Masonic Creed, written by John D. Rockefeller, a businessman who founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870. He's the one that looks like a dried up prune. He's just the most awful looking individual, who was widely regarded as the richest American in history. So this is taken from that creed. We will keep their lives short. So he's obviously talking about humanity and the sheep, or the useless eaters. We will keep their lives short and their minds weak while pretending to do the opposite. We will use our knowledge of science and technology in subtle ways so that they never see what is happening. We will use soft metals, aging accelerators, and sedatives in food and water, as well as in the air. They'll be covered in poisons wherever they turn. The soft metals will make them lose their minds. We will promise to fund a cure from our many funds, and yet we'll give them more poison. Chemical poisons will be absorbed through the skin of idiots who believe that certain hygiene and beauty products presented by great actors and musicians will bring eternal youth to their face and bodies, and through their thirsty and hungry mouths, we will destroy their minds and systems of internal organs reproduction. However, their children will be born as disabled and deformed, and we will hide this information. And on it goes, completely charming summary of the whole of the whole creed. And so you can see when you hear something like that, how this all ties in with, you know, all these so-called resets and what we've been experiencing.
Definitely, and those people, obviously, they're the ones who moved in and stole all these old world buildings, right? So they got Freemasonry, right? Free buildings, Freemasonry.
Yes.
So this is, and I mean, you can Google robber barons, and that'll tell you everything that was going on back there. Like, it's a title that they were called the robber barons, and these are the people that are still in control today. They literally went and they just took advantage, or they probably caused the last reset, and then just went in and just took over everything, and they controlled the population because they got rid of most of the people, and then they reintroduced a new population. And I mean, this is where, you know, where it, I guess, can get weird and everything, but, you know, we've all heard the stories, you know, back, you know, from the Bible and all these other old books and esoterics and theology, and they all seem to talk about, you know, genetic engineering, right? They just do. We didn't know it was genetic engineering 20 or 30 years ago, is because we didn't know what genetic engineering was. But now we can see things like, you know, they sinned against the birds, the beasts, and the fish, and we can kind of figure out that might be genetic splicing and things like this.
There was a figure that was washed up that goodness knows what it was, but it looked very scary on the Maroochydore shore in the Sunshine Coast just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh.
Probably washed up from underground, you know, DUMBSs. I'll see if I can put that up. I think it's going to be, I can actually, I'll edit it in and show people what it looked like, but that was just washed up in the last few weeks. But the other point with that, Cam, is that what happens when there are these sort of full-scale things where all the adults disappear, so you lose the generational knowledge and wisdom that's passed down, you know, to the children. And so it's basically they're trying to dumb civilization down every time, so that these children have got no foundation. They've got nothing to base their wisdom and their knowledge on, and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, they can break that. You know, people often say it takes 3 generations to, you know, to change something. No, it takes one. It takes one, because once you remove the children from the parents, then you can reprogram them. And of course, we have this phenomena of the world's fairs, which they started in the 1700s, but the big sort of one started in 1851. The first one was in England, and these were basically, when you look into them, literally kids would go there and they would be taught things, and they would have like little exams and things and worksheets that they'd fill out, and then if they got everything right, they'd get a passport. So this was literally indoctrination, and they had things like different cultures. They'd bring in different people and you know, dress them up as tribal people or whatever, and put them in a setting, and like human zoos, literally.
Yes.
And all this stuff, and then all the technology was in there as well. And of course, inventions, that word is interesting because it just comes from the inventory, right? Everything that they've got that they've already got. They don't invent anything. They've got an inventory.
They're not that smart.
An invention is going to just bring it out. No, they're not. They're not creative at all. So this is what they do, is they steal our creativeness and then invert it and use it against us.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we have and with the genetic and, you know, engineering, I think that, you know, a lot of the population were created underground, right? Genetically engineered, and then released. And when they were released, then we have the orphan trains that were going everywhere. Do you want to bring up some pictures while we're talking?
I'd love to. And that background behind you, is that the Big Ben in England? No?
No, that's actually, I think this is Melbourne in like
is it really? Oh gosh.
1890 or something.
Sorry, English.
Yeah, like this is the thing, like we kind of, you know, it's a good point, because that's what they do. Like these things were everywhere, and they knock them all over and leave 1 or 2 and go, oh, you know, that was just a masterpiece. But they were actually, you know, these things were everywhere. Every church had one as well.
And isn't that inspired to do with free energy, like a free energy device, you know, the way that they're constructed in that way?
Yeah. So the higher you go up in the atmosphere, the more current there is, basically, and you can literally just pull current out of the air with an antenna, and you just need it, you know, some sort of basic formwork, and yeah, it's free energy. And of course that's what they destroyed, right? Because when they took over, that's what they stole. They stole the power.
We think it was just the style of the architecture that they were creating, but no, they had the complete purpose behind it of using this, and this went, you know, thousands and thousands of years back in our history, hasn't it? That they've been utilizing these things that we didn't even know they were using.
Like the word cathedral is very, very close to cathode. You know, it's a cathode, which is you know, basically it's part of that's how you use to make a charge. So yeah, I mean, you know, the glory of God, the power of God, all this kind of stuff. It used to be, they used to give up, you know, they were full of organs, right? Organs are good for your organs because it's the vibration they give off. They had choirs in there for, it was all to do with frequency and vibration and all this kind of stuff.
Yes, great point.
But yeah, so this is an orphan train. So this is 1870s kind of.
Wow.
And you can just see like nice photo opportunity.
Yes.
And these orphans, is that the same one? I think that's the same one. They were just everywhere. And of course, this is World War II. Now, in World War II, they did it again. In England, they had something called Project Pied Piper, where they literally talked the adults into giving their children up. And they're like, oh, you're going to get bombed. They might die here. Give us your kids and all the rights to them, and we'll look after them. And, you know, and they're still now, well, they're sort of coming out now, all the politicians and governments, and saying, oh, sorry, you know, we admit we did that wrong, you know, like 80 years after the fact or something. And this is what they do all the time, right? They're always sorry when we can't fix it. We're just sorry it happened, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And don't their little faces look so sad? That's awful. And it reminds me also of the stolen generation in Australia with the original.
Same plan.
Yeah.
Same plan. That they really only have one plan. They're not, like we said, they're not creative.
No.
This shot here, you can see they've all got numbers. They literally had auctions, like you could buy orphans, and they had you could put in like especially in the US, they were sending a lot of the orphans out onto farms, and literally people could order what they wanted. They could say, I want, you know, a blonde-haired boy with blue eyes, or I want a dark-haired girl, or, you know, who's 6 or whatever, and they pretty much get it. And they just send all these kids out, and that there was nothing, you know, no one would check on them and what was happening. So you can imagine what went on.
Well,
and we're still going through this today.
Exactly. I was just saying that they continue that to this day, because you can still order children in the same way. And, you know, we look at the OBAMAs and people like that, who it's all coming out now that they've been doing this right in the White House and things like this right under people's noses. So, and the whole PIZZA business, you know, and everything to do with that, where that's about ordering not what you think it is.
And there's just so many of these, and they're all so young, and they just, you know, where did they all come from, right? There's no explanation as to where all these kids came from.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I would say that a good you know, explanation could be that they were created underground, you know, because they say that we're born with sin, right? I mean, what does this word sin mean? Does it mean that, because when you look up the origin, you know, the sort of origins, and that it says to not defy God and to not go against God, and then there's all these verses in the Bible that pretty much say the worst thing you can ever do to go against God is to, you know, change your body, let things into your body that shouldn't be there. So basically, sounds like genetic engineering to me, right? They say we're born with sin. And then you look into medicine and they say, oh, yeah, well, we've got 2 fused chromosomes, right? Like literally they say, yeah, we've been genetically altered. And then where do they send us to get fixed? They send us to the people who practice medicine.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is, so it's kind of all there in the language. These are just people waiting, you know, for the orphans to come off the train. I mean, so it was literally, they were just shipping these kids around everywhere. And I mean, look, they're all tiny, none of the clothes fit them or anything. And there's no parents.
Yeah.
Like, where are the parents? And, you know, these people, oh, yeah, give us 10 kids, you know, we want to start a factory, right? And these, and the orphanages, this was an orphanage. They were huge and they were everywhere.
Everywhere. They were everywhere, weren't they, orphanages? It reminds me very much of the bleakness of those Charles Dickens novels, where it was to do with, you know, the energy of the Industrial Revolution as well, even though all this happened way before that as well. But it reminds me of the energy of that, where, you know, everything was done en masse and there was no feeling of being able to tap into the human condition or compassion or love or any of those things. It was all so automated and robotic, and it just has that sort of feel to it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just this. Yeah, it's because it's literally people are coming back in and getting taught what the new, culture, right? Cult of air is.
Yep.
Because that's the thing, right? We're all part of a big cult. It's called the cult of air culture.
Yeah.
And in here, just a quick one, it says, even the bastion of mercy and forgiveness for wayward women, Catholic church-run charities around the world stand accused of forcing unwed mothers to give up their babies for adoption, or lying and telling them their babies had died and then giving the babies away anyway. This is the church. This is what the church was doing too. And that's another thing, is there was this big, this is how they did get some of the babies, is they were just stealing them. And, there's this big thing of unwed mothers, right?
Yes.
If you're an unwed mother, you were basically, shunned and looked down on, to the point where you couldn't get work, and so you then couldn't feed your children. And they'd come along and go, well, we'll look after your kids. We'll make sure they're fed. You don't want your child to die, do you? And they just take them off you.
Exactly.
And so this kind of stuff went on as well. So
and it reminds me of the I don't know if I can say it, the CPS now in Australia, that, same thing, taking children off families for the protection. I can't say the words, but the CPS.
Yeah.
In Australia.
Yeah, the ones who are supposed to protect our young ones.
Yes, and they're taking them for these nefarious purposes. Absolutely. Wow.
Yep.
So many images.
This is one of the human zoos I mentioned. At the World's Fairs, I get people to dress up and they say, oh, these people are from there, and it's a human zoo. And this is how they were reintroducing. Here's another one.
So
reintroducing
what
the population, and literally.
What was the purpose?
It was
misinformation.
To bring in the new culture. So, they had all these children that didn't know anything. So they were brought up and they were brought into like these World's Fairs and things, or they were taken to factories. And if you look into factories, they actually all started as pre-built towns.
Yep.
It wasn't like a factory where people went and got a job. They literally built the whole town, give everyone a house. And it's like, you live here, but you have to work 10 hours a day in the factory, and we'll feed you and all this. But the fairs were literally to introduce, they'd say, this is the Filipinos. This is what they look like. This is what they do. And that these guys were all pretty much stolen and told to, this is not what Filipinos were doing back then. This is all fake. This is all fake.
Yeah.
But they wanted to introduce a certain narrative, and so they told them, and like I said before, they even gave out passports and certificates, and that if you got the questions right.
Yeah.
Here's living babies in incubators, and these started at the World's Fairs. These incubators babies, that the first ones were at the World's Fairs.
Yes.
And here we go, incubator babies. I think you showed that one. And there's articles saying that they could grow babies in 3 months. Like that, it says something like from to a 12-month sort of size. They could grow them in 3 months or something.
All they needed
so they were accelerating the growth and everything.
Exactly, it's accelerated growth. They just need 2 stem cells apparently from the person, and then they can grow it within 3 months. Absolutely, it's the same with can I say the word CLONES? I don't know if I can say that. Same with it. They're very quick to create as well, but apparently they can become glitchy after a couple of years, and that's why we see a lot of these weird things happening with so frustrating not being able to say people's names.
Synthetics.
Yeah.
Can we say that? Synthetics?
Yeah. And they feel like synthetic, the skin and everything as well, apparently those. And we see a lot of the reporters and things that have had those glitchy moments on screen. Wow.
Yeah. So, and of course, a lot of them were stolen for, like we mentioned before, for people like the Obamas, and but I think they were the ones that they were using, and then the population was created. Because the other thing is, I mentioned the buildings before, how the buildings, many of them are too big, right?
Yes.
If you start going back, there's Oliver. If we start going back to the 1700s, even the 1800s, there's a lot of giant people around, like a lot of 8-9 foot people. There's lots of them. And so I think a part of what they did is they made us smaller. And when we look back in the past, the further you go back, the bigger the buildings get. And so it's like we've been, slowly sort of made smaller and more controllable, I guess.
Exactly. They can manipulate them better if they're smaller. They can get out of hand if they're too big. So, yeah, it's like the population.
Yeah.
Whenever the population gets too big, they're trying to squash it down to a minimum number, as in the Georgia, Stones. We won't say the full name because they've got the ideal number to control. Same, I guess, with their size, that they wouldn't want them too big. I've got some wonderful photos to share with you later too about, just a few, but to do with the giants as well. So, wow. So many. And, we don't hear much about this, do we? It's all very, very, it's all very hidden. And you have to really search to be able to find all this information. A lot of people would have no idea about this. I've talked to a few people and they say, what do you mean orphans? What incubator? They've never heard of it. So I think the more that we share this information and get it out there, the more we're going to learn to question every single thing that we've ever heard, basically, in terms of, where we've come from, our history, and really question everything now.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally, and that's what they've taken away is, we don't know who we are, we don't know where we came from, and now we pretty much don't know where we are. And that's what they want. They want a state of confusion, and like we sort of talked before about the orphans and how we're still dealing with that. I mean, like you can imagine, we know a lot of the people, probably the majority, unfortunately, who got hold of these kids probably weren't very nice to them, right? And that sets up, a generational thing where, and it's also because they didn't seem to know even how to handle kids or what they were. They seemed, the people who were taking them on, they seemed like they were, they'd probably just been through like massive trauma and stuff. Maybe they, they grew up with that parents from the last reset or whatever. But whatever is, the orphans were on the whole treated badly, and so they grow up and they don't know how to treat children, and then they pass it on. That's how we get this thing of parents who hit their kids, and that used to be, it wasn't even normal. It was almost like you were weird if you didn't hit your kids back in the 70s or 80s. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't hit your kids? And now it's a lot different. But I mean, you think about, where does that start? Like, that's not a human trait. Like that's something that's been introduced through all this trauma, and we're still going through it, because ultimately there was a cut, where we had a generation who didn't have parents. They didn't have that anyone to, a soft place to go, or anyone to give them real advice or to love them or any of this stuff. That was all, cut. And that's why we get all these, I mean, especially men, right? You get, it's almost a colloquialism. You get all these, these angry old men, they just don't know how to deal with anything. They can't speak. They've got no emotional, integrity or anything. And it's because they've never been taught it. No one, they just don't know.
That's right.
And then on top of that, women tend to go the other way and be, be a bit too over emotional, because they, they're yearning for something that they want to be, kind of thing. They want to, so it's all this, we're still dealing with all this trauma, and probably, I mean, what are we? Probably 4 generations later. Yeah. And now they're trying to do it again, because we know what they're attacking, right? The emphasis is definitely on the smaller people. This is, and of course, when this started, it was like, oh, no, we're not even thinking of them. No, they're fine. It's just the big people. And that how fast did that change? And now almost 100% of focus is on little people.
Absolutely.
And this is what they do.
Horrifying.
I actually heard someone the other day, Sonia, was talking about, in the US and their, can I say border? Their border, and all these people that are crossing it. And she was kind of saying, well, who do you think they are? Because there's all these people in the US who have, submitted.
Yeah.
And we know that these people are starting to drop. We're starting to see it everywhere. They're starting to drop like flies.
Yeah.
So who's going to replace them, right? Because we know the elites, they want their workers, right? And what's happening at the same time? Millions of people are flooding into the country.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't know where they came from.
No.
We don't know where these people came from. We're just told, oh, they come from, you know, South America or Honduras or something. We don't know that.
No,
We don't.
That's right.
Are they the next generation? You know, this is the thing.
Well,
You
this
know,
is the thing with
and of course it's the media.
Yeah, we always go and say, we say the same thing.
You're reading my mind.
I am reading your mind. That's a few about the third time that's happened. The mainstream media is, you know, just so subversive in being able to get us focusing on things that don't matter, like, you know, slaps on award ceremonies, and getting all the focus off the things that really matter, like the children that are being subjected to this, you know, you know what. So yeah, I hear you. And all the other things that are happening, like, for example, the Ukrainians being shipped out to different countries under the guise of needing somewhere to stay, but they're all got this, and then of course they're spreading the effects of this as well. So, you know, there's so much stuff happening out there. I do actually feel that there's some brilliant positive developments that are happening underneath, so that's really good, but not to just focus that, you know, it's all doom and gloom, but we need to know, you know, the truth of what's happened. So that's why it's so important to cover this area. Can I share with you some of my, as we've talked about giants, some of my giant pictures that I found? This is a really cool one. So this is,
yeah.
Have you seen that?
He's a French guy. Yeah, what's his Hugo? That's it, the great Hugo. Yeah. I'm not sure how real that one is. He was about 9 foot. You know, he was pretty big, but I mean, it just shows you, right, that, you know, because I'm actually always going on about lamps. Like pretty much every video I've done, if I see a lamp, I'm like, that bloody lamp's too big.
That's
because
why
they
I got the
are.
lamp there for you, Cam.
Because if that was gas, and we know that anything, you know, pre-18, you know, 60s, 70s had to be gas. After that, you know, maybe, because to make that electric, you've got to dig up all the streets and run all the pipes, right? You can't just turn the lamp into an electric lamp.
Sure.
And so who was lighting them?
Yeah.
You know, and also, if that was gas, how much light would it give off? Like, how practical would it be to someone our size?
Yes. Well, it takes me back to that free energy that they had through all that, you know, the spires and all those sorts of things that they ran cities with, you know, back. And yet we've seen images of that. And then look at this. This is really interesting. This lake.
There's actually a place in Bangladesh, an old temple, and it's still you can see the energy coming off its spire.
Right.
It's still working.
Wow.
Giant footsteps.
Yes.
Nice.
That, you know, no accidents. It looks awfully like a foot to me. And there's another one as well that I'll share with you, which is this one here. It's hard to do.
It's interesting because, like I said, the further back you go, the bigger people get, and you know, we have these stories of the Titans and everything.
Yes.
Like, wow, that's a good one.
Isn't that huge?
Is that 6 toes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, Nephilim. And if you read in the Bible, it says that Adam was.
Sorry.
Oh, did she?
Yes.
Oh.
And there's talk that she was an orphan.
She was one of them.
I know. Some people, when you Google her, they say she was an orphan, but her mother went into a mental institution, but she had 6 toes. But anyway, just aside there. Wow. Yeah.
Maybe she was one of the ones that was, you know, deemed unfit, and they stole the child. But I met someone, once who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each feet.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, dude, you're a Nephilim. But it's interesting because you don't actually even notice it until you stop and count. Like they don't look like they've got an extra finger, so you wouldn't even really notice it.
No.
But yeah, we have, you know, all these stories, but it says that Adam was, I think, 60 foot or something tall in the Bible.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's
yeah, so like big. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, it depends on what, but basically before the flood, the earth was a lot different. There was like a vapor canopy and everything was much bigger. And they tell us, right? They kind of tell us, they say, oh, dinosaurs, you know, were massive, but it was just that everything was bigger back then. I mean, they tell us dragonflies, you know, had a 2-meter wingspan and all these giant trees. And that's another thing is the giant trees. Not sure if you've looked into giant trees and all the plateaus and messes and things that we have around that look very much like tree stumps
and faces.
Yeah, and it,
of
yeah,
giants.
the titans in the mountains.
Even Mount Warning.
Yeah, there's a good one up at Machu Picchu.
Oh, sorry, there's a bit of an overlap. New South Wales and Mount Warning, it really looks like a face on its side. I'd also like to share, just to recap, to some of the things that we were talking about earlier. We're also sharing information about the buildings. So I wanted to share a few so people could understand what we're talking about when we say that it was reputed that there were these giant mud floods that came in and they just went through and sort of decimated the buildings that had been there and things. And you can tell that throughout the world there are these instances of buildings where the bottom levels of the building are sort of underground. And you know, even in Ballarat where I used to live, there are buildings like that. I remember looking at them where the windows were deep into the ground. Here's one right here that I can share, which is
lots underground in Ballarat too.
Yeah. Have you seen that one, Cam?
Not that particular one, but that's pretty much what we see everywhere. And look at the size of that door.
Yeah, exactly. that giant sized door, and that, I mean, you would never build a building like that with just a tiny little gap for a window like that. It just doesn't make any sense. So it defies logic that these things were ever built that way. So obviously they must have been covered. And so what do you think created these mud floods, or what are your theories on these mud floods as well, Cam?
I mean, there's a lot of people talk about liquefaction, which is, you know, basically when you get like volcanoes and they shake the ground and the ground turns to liquid and things sink in it. When that happens, though, things don't tend to sink upright, you know, like they tend to sort of fall sideways. So we do see some instances of that, but most of them look like they've been either inundated, well pretty much inundated, because we get in every city, you get these buildings like these streets that are on hills, and the buildings literally kind of go into the hill, like so they've been covered by something flowing. And I think it comes back to these resets. We have reset cycles, and it used to be taught in school. They used to teach catastrophism. You know, it was common knowledge until sort of not that long ago, 50, 60 years maybe.
Yeah,
and so we have these
perpetuating fear.
We have these cyclical events. But I think the biggest, you know, lie is they've got us all thinking that these are all like the Great Flood, like a worldwide event, when they're not. No. These are, I think they're localized. So you know, you have something that will take out a few cities. I mean, like we know of you know, Vesuvius and taking out, you know, certain cities, Pompeii, like burying Pompeii.
Yes, I went there. I
think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I went there. I saw it. It was incredible. They had things like there were colours there that had never been replicated, and they wondered how they got those ochres, you know, those colours in their paintings. And the bodies were really quite small as well, which was interesting. That were you know, mummified in the liquefaction of the ash and everything. And fascinating place Pompeii was.
Pompeii.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was going to say it didn't happen when they tell you it happened either.
No.
We've got maps and pictures of Pompeii from the 1700s.
Yeah.
So literally, it only happened a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah.
And this is what they love to do. Is they love to push everything back in the past.
Right.
Because when they push it back further, it gives them more timeline to fill in their story.
Sure.
And
sure.
so that's what they do with everything. Everything's, oh no, 10,000 years, like 10 million years ago. Oh, this is 60,000 years old. Oh.
Yeah.
When it's really, we're talking hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand for the oldest things.
You know, just in the last few weeks with the biblical floods, I mean, we had people in there that were saying that they talked to insurance people, and the insurance people said this was the biggest disaster ever in Australian history that they're aware of, you know, ever. So much information on how that was orchestrated and manipulated. So, you know, it just seems to indicate that this has been going on for a very, very long time to create these, potentially these mud floods in specific areas as well, like you say. I've got another
they're definitely doing it now.
Yes. I've got another image. I know you've talked about this one before. I managed to find it. Do you see that?
Yes.
Flood. Yeah.
So what do we got there? We got 4. So the top left is Paris. That was early 1970s. That was called the Hole of Paris.
Yep.
Because it was a massive hole, but you can see there's columns down the bottom under those buildings. So literally they're building on top of the old civilization.
Yeah.
And that's another, you know, a lot of these, you know, things underground may be to do with this, you know, these buried buildings.
Yeah.
The top one, that's the USA, and they're literally driving on the top of buildings, and the other 2 are Russia. There's a lot of them in Russia.
Yeah.
And you can see, I mean, these have been dug out, these bottom 2. You can see kind of the line of dirt.
Yes.
That used to be the street line. And you can see even there that on the right, the top of the windows that were above the street. And then you can see the rest of the window underground. So who would build a window to go underground?
Exactly.
So this is what we started finding. It was really interesting. You know, we started just looking at buildings. Oh, look at those windows. And then we started finding pictures like this, like where they'd actually done excavations and stuff. Yeah. And it's like, okay, we're right. It's really interesting. We kept on getting proven, like with the red bricks. Like we see all these buildings, and we sort of, you know, 3 years, you know, as a community, we started asking, is everything red brick? Because, you know, I don't know, like, are these? For some reason, and then we started getting all these pictures of, you know, these facaded buildings that look like they're marble on that, and the corner would be knocked off and it'd just be red brick under there. And so every old world building is red brick. There's also some yellow brick, but it's all red brick. I've got a couple of, do you want me to show you a few mud flood photos?
Okay, that'd be great. I'll put you as host. You just have to be like a detective to be able to piece together all the history that you know, from these pieces that has been completely kept from us on all levels.
Completely. Oh, hang on. Have I made that big? Okay.
The other thing
that's
really
just
interesting
one,
to note, Cam, is the ornateness of all these buildings. And I know this has been talked about. There was a series of like 4 videos that talked about all this, but the ornateness of buildings from the past that they said were created relatively recently by, you know, people that drove around in horse and buggies and things like this. I mean, who's, when you really think about it, who's going to swallow that? Because it's so obvious that the level of intricacy, and, you know, you go around Europe and you look at all the incredible, you know, in Florence, the beautiful church in the midst of there in Florence, and all the beautiful churches and everything that you see is supposedly being created by people that had the most basic of abilities in terms of building. And so all of that, just by pure logic, is clearly fake.
It's fake.
Yeah.
When you start looking at it, I mean, we're taught not to question it, but as soon as you look at it, it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And some of these buildings we're told were built, you know, in the Dark Ages and 1,000 years ago, when there was literally, they tell us there was nothing.
Yes.
And the big one is like the statues. There's statues everywhere, marble statues.
Yes.
And we're supposed to believe that they were made with a hammer and chisel.
Yeah.
Like literally where one wrong hit could destroy the whole statue.
Exactly.
They've just made thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
That's right.
This is just a picture of an actual mud flood. You can see these are all, buried. So that's what we get. But here's a church.
Yeah. Wow.
This happened a lot too, regrading. They used to go around and dig stuff out. I mean, you can see there's foundations under this. And they've lost a bit of the corner there. But
the other thing that's interesting in that one, Cam, is the sacred geometry of the windows. I mean, that is not an accident either, because that all helps in terms of energetics and stuff like that. The sacred geometry, in that window there, all those windows.
Yep.
The flower of life.
You got these, and then these as well, where it's repeated. And even these windows, these act as antennas as well. These are scalar antennas.
Right.
These windows.
Yep.
And so these were basically healing centers is what they were, based on frequency, right, and good vibrations.
Yep.
Just trying to find.
We're going to have to recreate a lot of this stuff when we set up our new world, aren't we? We're going to have to go back to all these things of the past and look at how they did it as well, and be able to benefit from that.
Well, this is, and it's not that hard. Like they were teaching kids how to make free energy, and back in the 40s and 50s. Like literally in primary school, they were building all this stuff and.
Yes.
And we're taught it's so hard and it's so and dangerous, right? It's so dangerous. You can't touch electricity, and you have to be an electrician to do anything. And it's no, it's not for the normal person. Just pay your bill. Just pay your bill.
Exactly.
But when you look into it, it's actually not. It's just a scam. It's easy to make. It's not that dangerous if you've got half a brain.
Yeah.
And it's just again how they're stopping us looking into things. That's their greatest, their greatest tools is subversion and dumbing us down, just not letting us know. Anything. So now if you go out and you say, I'm going to make a free energy machine, everyone thinks you're crazy. But 100 years ago, everyone had a free energy machine.
Yeah. I had some uncles, relatives that put a lot of money into the electric car. I think it was in the 70s, and they lost a fortune because it was squashed by the petrochemical corporations, and they lost millions. Yeah.
They did, and now they've had to redo it so that they can control it, and they're re-releasing it again. We've had cars that run on water since the 70s at least.
Magnetic.
Even magnetics. Our Buckminster Fuller made some interesting cars.
Yes.
And even Henry Ford, and I don't know if it was him or someone from his company, but they made a car that ran on hemp oil, and it was made from hemp resin.
And sugar?
I still had a car that we drove around Coney Island.
Right.
And it just had a antenna sticking out the boot. And that was it. No engine.
Yeah.
So it's so this picture here, you can see see the street level, you can see the line. And they're just, doing city works, and you can see these are windows.
Yes.
Way along, underground.
Yeah.
So it's not. Well, that's something that's been buried, and this shows that this is a much older sort of. This would have happened a lot before the last photo.
It looks like
so it's not one mud flood we're looking at. We're looking at lots of them.
It looks a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's in Turkey. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, everything looks a bit Roman or Greek.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all to show you the windows everywhere. But this Greco-Romano.
Right. I wanted to ask you too. I mean, there's also the fascinating information that you've been sharing about how the original people in Australia, when they knew about these buildings that already existed on the land here. Obviously before it was so-called colonized by the Caucasians. So
I mean, these things, they're just, and they're all over the realm. They're everywhere, and in Australia and in America. And so Australia and the US are good. I mean, Australia's obviously a lot newer. How do they explain that they were building levels underground, and of course they tell us they were beer cellars and all this kind of stuff, and oh, that's you know how they got the beer here. It's always beer in Australia.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, that's another way that they can. That's another way that they can keep people controllable, by putting them onto these sorts of things, so that they, well, you know, spirits create entities. That's why they're called spirits, and they don't serve people, particularly if people become you know, reliant on them and addicted. You know, it's going to be a great tool for them to be able to keep the population controllable. You know, you go around Australia and all the pubs everywhere, and then you go around England and there's a pub on every corner, and you know, it was a great resource or tool for the elites to be able to keep us under a certain level of capability, you know.
When you look at the construction of what they tell us is the construction of towns, they always build a brewery first in Tasmania, down when it was, you know, Van Diemen's Land, and apparently a colony built by the people who were locked up in it. One of the first buildings they built, like the jail, a woman's home, I think, and a brewery. And the brewery was like this 5-story old world building, you know.
Oh,
I think is it Carlsberg or something down there? Or it's something they make. It's no Cascade. Cascade, I think, Cascade Breweries.
Right.
That was the first one.
Wow.
But this is the kind of stuff they used to build. This stuff used to be everywhere. And the other thing that we find is like they just knock this stuff over. They go around and they just knock them over and replace them with car parks or this brutalist, you know, right-angled, you know, architecture.
Well, I guess
even this is like New York.
Right.
And you can see even these old apartment buildings. They've got mud-clad windows.
Well,
these are actually old world buildings.
Sure. I guess too many questions are going to be asked, Cam, if they're allowed to stay. You know, people will start asking questions. So it makes it easier for them if these types of incredible, you know, buildings are not able to be seen by people and destroyed.
Yep. Here's a church. You can see that that someone's drawn in the old floor level or the old ground level. And this is what they uncovered, like 2 stories. And underneath it's got all these pillars and stuff.
Wow.
And you see this everywhere, but they, and literally to the point where now where they work on stuff like this, that you can't get in there. Everyone who goes and works on them has to sign in and have silent, you know, silent, what are they called? Non-disclosures and things, so they can't talk about what they're working on.
Yes.
Because look at this. I think this might be the one that we looked at before. You can see there. That's the old road line, the old ground level.
Right.
This is a window with glass in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was under the ground. This is a complete doorway with a door in it. And so, you know, whoever, you know, some people want to say, oh, it's all, you know, this doesn't exist. It's all crap. It was, you know, why would you build a level with glass in the windows and a doorway and then bury it? That makes no sense.
You know what? It makes sense though when you think about it, because if someone's wanting to control a population, if they're able to destroy them all through, for example, a cataclysm, like a so-called natural disaster, like a mud flood, and then they can start again. So then they can start from scratch, and then it makes it much more controllable for them. So you can see the logic behind why they would destroy, you know, civilizations in that way, and because, you know, as we're getting to the point now where they're wanting the reset, because we're getting beyond a point where they can control us. There's too many of us, and more people are becoming awake. And so therefore, that's the moment when they really wanted to trigger it, and they actually brought it forward. It was going to happen in 2030, all this pandemic business and everything, but they've brought it forward. And because they brought it forward, it's been rushed through, and there've been flaws in the whole plan, and that's been their downfall, because ultimately they're not going to succeed, and the light are going to win. And so yes, that was really interesting.
But yeah, I mean, they definitely, don't know why they went early. I think it has something to do with what was going on in the US, but they definitely went early in it. It's
Yes, they
completely
rushed it through. Well, yes, it was
stuffed
because the jab, the jabs were pushed through before they'd had the proper so-called, investigations, and then this meant that there were, difficulties with their whole reasoning and being able to roll it out and everything. So, yeah, there's so much to it.
It is, but it's all it's all a scam. That's why I sort of do what I do with history, because when people understand how much of our history is just literally, it's just all lies, then they can kind of understand, okay, we're still being lied to.
Exactly.
It's kind of another way to wake people up. We don't have to sort of say everything's bad, everything's we're slaves and all this kind of stuff. We can say, look what we used to do. This is who we are. We used to build this stuff. We had free energy. They came in and took it. So let's take it back. This is the Mormon Temple in Salt Lake City.
All right, yeah.
And this is a good one, right? Because same story. It was supposed to be built in the 1800s. That the settlers turned up, with no tools and no materials, but suddenly they had enough material to build this massive building. But they built it underground. This is a person sitting down here.
Yes.
This is where it was. This was the ground level.
That's the front steps up there, isn't it? Those steps would be where they walked in the front.
Yeah,
door.
Exactly. So yeah, you can see this is the old front door.
Yes. Yes.
Right, and then they've built the steps on top. This window, again, right? They cut it off there, but it keeps going under the ground. Right. And so this is 16 feet. And this one, they found the foundations. So 16 feet, it would have been buried, this one.
Wow. Wow.
There's another shot. And that's what we used to live in. That's what we used to build. I mean, and we were talking about the free energy. Look at this. So we see this is a free energy device, and you can see these are all spires, antennas and things, resonators. There's a whole sort of lot to it, but all of these towers, I mean, you can see that's a lot more intricate than the ones we see today.
Yes.
The further you go back, the older the pictures are, the more, I mean, look at this building, the more intricate things were, and they literally come along and they rip off all this facading. Yeah. And they cover them in like just, paint or like lime wash or even wood and stuff, just to, a lot of it's to do with, they want to create cultures, like it's like if you go to Italy, everything will be that orange color, right? Yeah. Down in Tuscany and stuff. And it's like, that's Tuscan. You go to the Australian outback and everything's got a veranda around the outside and an iron roof. That's Australian.
And you know what?
But you take the iron roof and the veranda off, they're all the same underneath.
And subliminally, what that does, it divides people because they think, oh, we're like this and they're like that. So the undercurrent of that is creating division between all people, because in truth, we are all one consciousness, one family. And this is what they're continually trying to deprogram us against understanding, because when we unite, that's their downfall.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's another mudflutter there. But this is the thing. I mean, the old world, these kind of buildings are everywhere. And look what, this is all they can do now is these ugly, things full of fluorescent lights that are bad for you and right angles that are bad for you. And these things steal your energy while these things enhance your energy. These are built to create energy and frequency and things like this. So, I mean, just look at this. I mean, look at these buildings. Incredible. And they knock them all over. Yes. And you can see on the roof the amount of antennas and things up on it, to get their free energy. So it's just crazy.
That really blew me away was the Gaudi Cathedral in Spain, Barcelona. That was incredible.
Oh yeah. Amazing. Well, that one too. I mean, I think that's, I think that's an old world building that they've just covered. Like they're just covered in dripping cement, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Because how long have they been working on that? 300 years or something?
Oh, I know. It just went on and on and on. They said. When I was, how old were they? 20. They were still working on it. Hadn't been finished. That was a few years ago. I'm not giving too much away, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's been going for a long, long time.
Look, it's
Have you heard of the? Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry. We're so enthused by this topic. We're talking. Go ahead, Cam. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, have you heard of the World's Fairs?
Do you mean
I mentioned them, but have you know much about them?
Like the Coney Island fairs and things like that?
No, these were they actually still have them. They just had one that closed not long ago, but they were basically, now they're like trades fairs, but they were, I'll show you some photos that they were. This is oh gosh, St. Louis, I think.
Venice?
It's America.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
Like
this is, and so yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is inside one of the buildings. Now, these World's Fairs, they had buildings, because there were heaps of them all over Europe. We had them in Australia, all over the US. They were just everywhere.
Yeah.
And they'd regularly build buildings that covered like 20 acres.
Wow.
Like a building, one building would be 20 acres. And and the story with all these World's Fairs is that they built them all from scratch.
Yeah.
Like this. This is one.
Didn't they say they went up really
in the
quickly?
US.
I remember hearing it.
They were all built
quickly, and it was so non-believable.
Within like 3 years.
Yeah. Most people can't build a normal house in that 1 year. You know?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, you can see that they built. There's one narrative that says it was 3 years. They built 1,500 buildings. The biggest building covered 20 acres.
Yeah.
And it was just, and then when they build them, they hold the fair for like 9 months and then they knock it all over.
Isn't that unbelievable?
And they literally say that they were built. They say that they were built to be knocked over. And what they try and get us to believe is that all these buildings were built out of like wood and plaster, and they weren't actually brick.
Gosh.
Now, the problem is with that story is we still have in Melbourne, there's an exhibition building and it's not made of plaster and wood. I can guarantee you that is a solid masonry brick building, and we have them everywhere. But they try and tell us, no, it was built to demolish. So what they were doing, and I mean, they don't even mention who dug the canals, who put the irrigation for all these fountains in 1880s, what it would take to shoot water that high in the air.
Yeah. They're copying the Trevi Fountain there.
This one, well, this is the thing. They will probably be everywhere. They probably had a function. It was like a piece of, that center bit maybe, fractalized the water or gave it a certain vibration to make it better for you. And then they knock them all over and they leave one, and they go, see, that was just this amazing thing built by this amazing artist. But literally, I mean, you can see there's an obelisk here.
A Freemason.
This is the US.
Obelisk.
I mean, look at all these arches. Yeah. All these arches, domes. It's all the same. Like you said, it looks like Venice. Looks like Europe.
Why do you think that they destroyed them so quickly? Just what do you think was behind that? I mean, obviously they don't want the truth going out there about what's really going on, but what do you think was behind the destruction so quickly?
The cities were already there. They didn't build them.
Yeah.
They found them like this. They cleaned them up, dug them out, all that kind of stuff. And then they gave them one last hurrah, and they used them, as indoctrination for the new population.
And then
got them in, and then they destroyed. Destroyed it. It's almost like a slap in the face. It's almost like them, just giving us a slap in the face, isn't it? Because they knew that it was our civilization that built them all. Well, and they bring it back, and they just knock them all over.
We couldn't enjoy that level of, extravagance and luxury because we're just useless eaters. No. What's the point of that?
Yeah, and they were probably
in their eyes
functioning.
Yeah.
And if they had free energy, then no way. But I mean, just look at these. I mean, look at this fountain. It's
Incredible.
just ridiculous.
Mm.
You
Level of,
know, free, you know, obviously free travel on the water, free energy. All
yeah,
these old world cities too, they all had tram systems. Like all of them had tram systems. They had railway systems. Where we were pretty sure they all had airships as well. They were using airships.
I think
But
the
this is
crux,
another shot. Look at the size of this building here.
wow. I think the crux of it is they don't want to get us to imagine a world where we could live so grandly and so have so much pleasure and enjoyment. They don't want to sow that seed for us, because then who knows, we might create these incredible things, and they don't want to encourage that. They want us to live simple, basic lives so that we can stay controllable.
Yeah, and not have the power to do anything, right? It's all about power.
Yes.
If we had free energy, no one would go to work.
No.
And as soon as that happens, they lose their control.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need the money system that they, because that's what they use, right? The work, the money system, all these things. We wouldn't need any of that.
No.
If we had this. So that's what they're scared of. And that's what they stole. It's like we go to, that they trick us, and hopefully people won't get tricked again. But, they used to go every 3 or 4 years and elect someone, right? I mean, what's their, God, elect someone to power, right?
Yeah.
And you even go to the polling booths, right? You go between the polls, right?
Yeah.
The polls, right?
Yeah.
Joachim and Boaz. Right? So it's all in the language. It's all there.
I think too, if people are sort of questioning it, saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. This is, crazy," and they haven't known about this, I'd encourage people to go in on a meditation and ask their inner guidance, their higher self, is this true? Is this real? And just see what inner answers you get, because you're not going to get answers, obviously, from the status quo at the moment. If you go and Google or something, you're not going to get answers there. So what we do have is our own inner barometer and our own inner guide, where we can ask about all these things within, and then we will get the answers that are much more authentic than we can get externally. Yeah.
And that's what we have to do, because if we go outside and ask and read the textbooks and all that and ask the experts, they'll just tell us the same BS story they've been telling us, like his story, right?
Yeah.
But this is one of the buildings. This is in California, from one of the California World's Fairs, World's Expos, and you can see it's not made of paper and cardboard and plaster like they try and tell you. It's still there. And it's still sitting like on the canal that was built for it. They've just probably filled the rest of it in. And they've only left this. Everything else they've knocked over pretty much and got rid of.
Sure.
So, their story, there it is again, just doesn't make, I mean, you can then look at the size of that. And I could tell you that was in Italy and you'd believe me.
Yes.
Or Greece, right? Because this is not Greco-Romano architecture. This is old world. It's all the same. Look at these statues. This is in America. What relevance do these statues have to America or the USA or this architecture?
Exactly.
It's not American. So if they were going to build a World's Fair to show off America to the world, why would they build it to look like a different country?
Exactly.
I mean, look at this. That's one of the buildings that they apparently built so they could knock it over 9 months later.
It just makes no sense. Wow.
It doesn't, right? And again, look at these free energy devices.
Wow. Well, we're just going to have to, really have, groups of people that come together and they go back over all these things, and they also intuitively maybe remote view, and then they intuitively use their higher guidance, and we'll have to reconstruct the truth of, what has really happened. I mean, wouldn't it be fascinating to have the true story, the whole story, and be able to know what really went on? Yeah.
I just hope it's still there. I'm hoping it's still under the can't say that word, under the house where the papa lives. There's supposed to be a lot of information there, but we just don't know, because they love to destroy information, don't they? All the book burnings and all this kind of stuff, and which, you know, just to everyone out watching, you know, with the internet, right, we don't want to have everything as electronic data, because they can wipe that. You know, we need to start getting back to hard, because that's what they've tried to do. They've tried to get us to not buy books and to put everything on a Kindle, right, or you know, an audio book or something, and so they can wipe that, and we'll be left with nothing. So we
manipulating
start printing it.
Yeah. Very good point. You don't want everything in one. It's like in one basket. You want multiple baskets of information in different ways. You know, it reminds me of, you know, people that in the past they put, you know, in a bottle, they put some information in a bottle and they dig it under the ground. What were they called? There's a word for those. Time capsules.
Time capsules.
Yeah. Where you know, people would dig up those and they'd have information. That, I mean, things like that might work as well.
Yeah. We just start burying our books. I mean, that's how they found the Nag Hammadi library, didn't they, in the Dead Sea Scrolls? That was all buried.
Absolutely, and there's still got more of those to discover, I believe, that would maybe unveiled and found in coming years, in divine timing, I guess. So I do want to ask you before you go, Cam, it's been such an incredible chat with you, but what can I ask you just briefly? I know this is probably a whole video in itself. What can I ask you about starports? Just give us a brief
Star fort, yeah. So they call them forts. They're trying to tell us that they were all made for war. They're also called bastion forts. They try and tell us that they're bastion forts.
Right.
Basically, the story is that they were. Hang on, let me just share it.
I don't know a lot about them myself, so I'm also learning.
So this is a star fort.
Right, yeah.
As you can see, they get the name because they look like stars.
Isn't Canberra one of them? It's got one of those?
I don't know. It's got a lot of water in Canberra. It might be.
Yeah.
But all the old world cities were attached to these star forts.
Oh yes.
And all the old cities were all walled cities.
Right.
And as far as we can tell, they
were power generators, basically.
They were power stations.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
So so they were supposed to be the like the power generators attached to the city. When you look at the old maps, you see the cities, and then on the side you'll see like a star, like literally like it's like a motor or something sitting there.
Right.
But the story is they were all built between 1500 and 1750 by the Italians and the French. But the problem is we have star forts in Australia, and we weren't apparently discovered until 38 years after they stopped building them. But we have star forts.
That's a problem.
Right? So that's a problem. so now they go in and they put, you know, these gun turrets in them and try and say, oh, it was a World War II fort. And of course, in Australia, we've got all these forts, right? No one ever came to Australia. We were never going to get people. There's a fort at Hobart, on the tip of Tasmania.
Yes.
Like they thought that someone was going to go and try and invade Hobart. That was never going to happen.
No.
So they just make these silly stories up, and they say that this amazing geometry, right, was built for battle, for war, you know, as a defensive for war. Now, I mean, apart from everything else, the whole idea of forts like this doesn't make sense, because if you're going to have a war, what does everyone, I mean, these take years and years and years to build. Does everyone go, okay, we're going to have a war, hang on, let's stop. What we'll do is we'll have it in 5 years. Quick, everyone go build your forts, and then we'll start the war. You can't build a fort once you've started the war.
No. They're taking advantage of the fact that people don't understand the power of sacred geometry. You know, when people really have studied that and they know what that means, it has incredible energy and inherent power to do a lot of things that people don't fully understand. So when they know what that means in terms of sacred geometry, they know what you can create through sacred geometry in terms of power and all sorts of energetic things.
And of course, these all have moats as well. You know, they used to tell us, you know, of castles with moats and that.
Yes.
But this is what they were trying to, you know, talk. They were trying to, you know, change this story, because star forts have always got water around them. And of course, this one's just some random like village in Africa, and you can see there's half a star fort there.
Wow. Yes, they said with the moats, they did that for protection, because then they couldn't swim across the moat to attack them. Rubbish. The water was an energy generator, and it was working with the energy of the power to create the free energy.
So what does water carry, or how does it travel? It's water currents, right? Current.
Yes.
Electricity.
Currents.
It's all the same, you know, the same language.
Yes.
And so this one's in Russia. I mean, they're absolutely everywhere. And you can see this one is, they're based on, obviously, on geometry and numbers. This is 5-pointed. And you can see in the middle, it's got a pentagon, 5-sided in the middle. And then even on the outside, there's 1, 2, 3. I mean, we've lost the other 2, but there would be another 5-pointed star under it. Because most of these that we find, they're at least half buried. I mean, that's a nice one there, but you can see this. Sorry?
Oh, sorry, Kim. I'm just saying they're so precise and they're so symmetrical that, you know, that is because they had to be created that way in order to have the effect that they needed to have in terms of generating the energy. So they couldn't be just randomly, you know, all over the place. They had to be really precise.
So they're built on energy points, probably on like node points,
ley lines,
and they're just reflecting the geometry of and the frequency of that particular node, and so that they're like ramping it up, generating more of that same energy that they can then harvest. I mean, and look at this one; it even looks like it's exploding like electricity down at the bottom end here.
Yes.
You know, is that indicating which way the energy is flowing? You know, we're not sure. I mean, the Netherlands has got some really good ones, but they're just absolutely everywhere, these things. Italy.
It reminds me of the crop circles.
The crop circles, yes.
And yes, you know, the crop circles are created often with orbs. Now, orbs is really interesting. I just did a post on orbs because I had a galactic experience. And so people, please go and watch my video on my galactic experience. But, you know, these orbs are coming back now and they're working with us energetically and helping us. And I was guided to say that people need to ask educational facilities for children around the world to invite the orbs of light to come in and work with the children, because this is really needed at the moment. Nice. So, all interconnected.
It is. This is just an old map. This is, what is it? Antwerp. There you go, Antwerp. Just to show that they all look like this. So this is the city. So the city is actually a massive star as well. And there's our star fort. So they're always attached like they're like a generator of some kind.
Yes, exactly.
So the old world that they tell us is just nothing, you know, and it's obviously all on the symbols and stuff, but it's nothing like what they told us it was. I mean, these things are just everywhere. And you can see that they're half buried, but they're also like the Nazca lines, because we couldn't see them until we got above and could look down on them. You can't see the shape like this until you're up in the sky.
It reminds me of the church windows with these incredible crystalline sort of symmetrical structures that, again, we're helping the energy in, you know, cathedrals and churches, these same sort of shapes as well.
Yes, I've done. If you've got another minute, let me have a look. I've got another star fort, this one, I think. This is, so there's a guy, he's like I think he's Dutch or something. This is a oscilloscope. So in this, you play frequencies and sound through it, and it turns that sound into a shape. And look at the shape it creates.
Wow.
And when you up the frequency, they get more complex. So we get like a 5-sider, and then it goes to a 6-sider. Then you get curved edges. Now these, we can find star forts that look exactly like all of these pictures pretty much. Oh, it's gone.
Yes.
You know, they're always, the middles are always like hexagons and pentagons and things like this, you know, double-sided stars. That one looks like that one we saw that was sort of exploding out, where they're touching at one end and they get bigger at the other. So, you know, this is what we believe they were. And like you said, the same with the cathedral windows, is if you pump sound through a certain shape, it'll alter the frequency and turn it into, you know, basically the sound will then mirror the shape, because everything is frequency, right? You know, that gets thrown around a lot. But the thing is, frequency, you know, what's frequency, right? Frequency can be sound, it can be color, it can be shape, it can be form. And so what we're looking at is just all different expressions of the same thing.
That's right. That's right. I read this great book many years ago about how healing can be incredibly swift with a combination of different vibrational modalities combined together. So you're getting a color that's, for example, a ray that's facing on somebody's body, and then you're getting a sound frequency of exactly the same vibration coming in, and you can deconstruct energetic, you know, like cysts or growths that have, you can completely eliminate them through a combination of different vibrational frequencies coming at them. And you know, there's a lot of information on that out there, which is, you know, all
the Rife machines and things like that. And these are cymatic pictures of, well, Sirius, Earth, Sun, Mercury, and it's the same thing. I mean, look at this one. That's literally a star fort. Right? Mars tone, Venus tone, again, same thing. And we get these in Dr. Emoto's work, where he freezes the ice crystals.
And if you
know,
say
so like snowflake type things,
it makes those beautiful symmetrical shapes. Lovely words. And if you say something ugly, it's all misshapen and not non-symmetrical and like that.
And it is a bit of intention. You can get the polluted water and you can stick "I love you" on it, leave it for a few days, and it'll turn clean.
That's right. When you have these beautiful symmetrical shapes, it inherently infers that it's a beautiful energy. It's a benevolent, it's a higher, more evolved energy, which is, of course, what the elites and the controllers didn't want us to be working with. These higher frequencies.
This is what fear is. So this is literally where it gets back to fear and lowering people's vibration and energy. And this is what so many of us have been talking about for the last 2 years. Raise your energy, right? Raise your vibration. We want to be like this. You don't want to, you know, be like a goopy sort of mix, you know. And these are just piano tone, like musical notes. And again, it's the same thing. Like, what's that? A star fort or a snowflake or a musical tone? You know, it's all the same thing.
And you know, to have a strong immune system, you want to be at a certain high frequency so that you are sort of guarded against things coming and impacting on you. So, you know, through everything that's going on, you want to maintain as high frequency, if only for the physical body to be at its most sort of immune efficient, you know.
Well, I mean, the whole fruit, I mean, obviously mandalas as well, the same thing.
Beautiful.
But the whole food thing is a scam, I think. The whole food thing, you know, where food's not I mean, we know, right? Everything's energy. Like food, they tell us it's all kilojoules and calories and chemicals, and it's not. It's energy. It's energy. It's vibration and frequency. You know, we need to eat the food that's vibrating with us and where we want to go, but also just that has high level vibrations, you know, that's not processed, that's fresh from the garden, all this kind of stuff has life force in it.
That's the key. Absolutely. And processed food,
that's where they get us. So
processed food, and wheat. I mean, you know, the biggest things that they push on us, you know, that you know, in school, right, everyone has to have a sandwich, right?
Yeah.
You go to school without bread, you're like a weirdo. And now we know bread's probably the worst thing you could feed anyone.
There's the occultism in the language again, Cam, because witch, sandwich, it's occult, black magic stuff.
Yeah, sandwich. yeah. It is.
hidden in plain sight.
I mean, and even like breakfast, right? Oh, that's a nice one. That's what's it called? It's in France,
Oh, that's
something.
stunning.
Basically, it gets covered in water. But yeah, that's an old like star, basically.
It is.
Because we see all these stars, and most of them are buried, and you
Yeah.
only see the top bit of them. But I mean,
Yeah.
look at that cathedral. It's just
Incredible.
ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, they do things the hardest way they can do it, and of course, it's all based off of nature.
Yes.
All they were doing in the old world was just copying nature.
That's right. And a flower of life, you know, that which is the basic cellular structure of everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Seed of life to the up to the flower of life. So, and there you go, Starfort's harmonics, right?
Oh well,
there we go.
You could talk for hours and hours and hours about this. We already have.
I know, right?
So fascinating.
One of those topics.
Yeah, that was just incredible. So I hope that this has brought some you know, eye-opening information to some people out there that maybe didn't realize that all this stuff has been hidden from us in the past, and even maybe for the people that knew, maybe some additional information as well that they can share with other people and get this knowledge out there, and, as you say, spark the inspiration to recognize that the information that we're still being given now is completely baseless. In some instances, when it's gone out in a public platform in any way, whether it be mainstream media, Google, or whatever. So thank you, Cam. That was just brilliant, and
my pleasure.
Really appreciate your wisdom here and your vast knowledge on this topic. And it was really wonderful to connect with you again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Very welcome.